What's up, good people? Good morning. Happy Saturday. Welcome to LAFB Live. I'm Ryan Dyrud. I'm joined by the great Stephen Haglund. Excited to talk some Rams and Chargers this morning. We're going to do some we're going to skip the first round. Enough of pick 13 for the Chargers. I know Rams fans are sick of hearing it, and Chargers fans are probably sick of hearing about it even more. So we're going to talk about the second and the third round today, about both these teams' options, as we are just, I think you tweeted out today, 18 days away. So, well, first of all, Steven, what's going on, brother? How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Doing great. Gonna go hit the links after this little session, and I'm really excited to get back to normal. Went and saw a movie last night with the wife. It's been a good couple of weeks, man.
Dude, where you playing at? I'm jealous. That sounds amazing.
We're just barely getting started. We did some small par 3 courses last summer, and so today we're doing our first 18-hole par 4 course. So gonna be fun here in Clovis, California.
Okay, so is it all par 4s?
I think there's a couple par 5s, but yeah.
Oh, okay, so normal course basically.
Yeah,
par 70 or whatever. So
yeah.
Oh man, I'm jealous. Well, I was watching the Masters before this. So before we get into it, we'll just recap kind of what's going on with both of us. So, it's fun to catch up, but
absolutely.
We talked last week. I'm not a morning person. So this 9 a.m. thing anyway was going to be a battle doing this at 9 a.m. Got the coffee flowing. I'm on cup number 2, but,
wow.
My daughter, so Mia, she's never been a good sleeper regardless.
Oh man.
Since she's been born, she's a year old now. She's still in that wake up every 3 to 4 hours to eat phase. But we at least got it down to a T where I'd get her to bed around 8. So then she'd wake up at 11, 2, 5, and then she'd go again and then sleep till 8. So at least it was every 3 hours, but at least she would go until 8. Now she's sleeping 5 hours straight, but she's up at 4:30 or 5, and she's up. So she was up today I think she was up today at 5, and it was my turn to get up with her. So yeah, I've been up since 5, just freaking getting after it, trying to just be awake. So, but excited to
and there's not much TV on at 5 in the morning either.
Yeah, luckily though, that was the whole reason why I started saying this before I got down the rabbit hole, is that the Masters, because the Masters is on and it starts super early because it's out east. So I've been watching the Masters since about 5 this morning. So I got the golf pitch. I'm very jealous to hear you're going.
There we go.
We got to do
I'm excited.
Palm Springs sometimes.
Absolutely, I'm down.
Yeah. I used to play every week before I was married. Now I go twice a year if I'm lucky. But
luckily my wife is into it too. That's how I kind of started. She actually worked in a golf shop when we were still living in Utah, and I loved it. I wasn't into golf back then, but I was 50% off of Travis Matthews shirts and Utah polos like this one and things like that. So it was great. That's how the golf interest kind of started for both of us.
Well, good. There you go. Yeah. So is she going with you today then?
Yes, just me and her today.
Nice. Okay. My wife always wants to. She's eggs me on, are you taking me? What are we doing? I just have that vivid memory of the movie I Love You Man when they're out golfing and Jason Segel. This is my nightmare. Gets hit with him. I'm like, babe, I love you so much, but this is my one. This is my thing. This is me.
This is my getaway.
Yeah, but I'm learning now. If I want to go, I need to bring her. So if I actually really want to go, I need to just accept it that she's coming. So
absolutely.
We'll do. Before we get into it, you mentioned it in the intro there. You went to the movies last night. What was that like? It's been over a year since I've been to the movies. How was that?
Oh man, it was so nice. The movie was kind of all over the place. I went and saw Godzilla versus Kong, and it was everything you expect a big monster movie to be, right? Just absurd and bonkers and all this stuff. But walking in and just getting that whiff of popcorn, for the first time in a year, it was an awesome feeling. And we went with some friends of ours, so it was a great thing to go back and see a movie.
I love it, dude. Yeah, it's therapeutic. You walk in with that popcorn,
100%.
The candy. I used to never really be a concession guy, and I feel like now when I go back, I'm going ham on the concession.
Yeah, and there's just there's something about that feeling of walking down those stairs after a movie. Just that post movie high a little bit. It was just a lot of fun.
Yeah, with the lights on and watching your step, and there's something special about it. And
absolutely.
The movie, though, was it fun? I know you said it was all over the place, but was it a good time?
It was fun, man. It was entertaining. You got to see a giant monkey fight a giant dinosaur or whatever Godzilla is in this, rendition. And it was a lot of fun, man, for sure.
Love it. I have HBO Max, so LA, who knows when we're actually have theaters open out here. So I need to watch it on HBO at least, or it might just wait. I think we're close down here to open too. So
well, you should be close because I know like Orange County and stuff like that's open. So
yeah, Orange County.
Imagine LA gets there in a couple, a few weeks or so.
Yeah, we'll get there. But yeah, Orange County makes me laugh because they're to their own tune. They just kind of do what they want. So, different world. But
yeah.
All right, bro. Well, glad you got some normalcy there. Looking forward to when we can hang out and do that together. But yeah, dude, let's talk some draft. That's what everyone's been talking about. You've been crushing on these profiles. You're a machine, man. Just how much work you put into doing this, and so I'll be the first. I'll be the first to say this. This is going to be more of a one-sided conversation. I'm gonna try to give as much as I can to this, but I think Steven's the more draft guru. But I've done my stuff for the Rams. I'm doing some center stuff right now. Because I think that's a big position of need. So I'm actually making a video with different 5 center prospects. But anyway, I think how we'll do this, guys, for those listening, thank you all for tuning in. We're going to go over Chargers pick in the second round, kind of some prospects that Steven likes, and I'll counter. Rams second round, then we'll do the third round for both teams, and then we're actually going to go through a mock draft and see how realistic those players will be at those positions, and I'll throw it up on the video board here on the screen and just have some fun with it. So
there we go.
With that being said, Steven, I'll kick it to you. Let's start with some guys you like and some realistic guys you like for the Chargers here at the second round. And I guess obviously you'll probably have to preface it a little bit. We don't want to get into it, but who you have them taking at 13.
Yeah, so I mean, everybody who knows me knows that I'm taking an offensive tackle at 13. I just think the value there is too good. So the idea that I've kind of been really focusing on recently for the Chargers is actually them taking a safety at 47. Mm-hmm. We did a mock draft on our Guilty as Charged podcast show, and I chose Richie Grant for that reason. And so I have Richie Grant, Trayvon Moehrig, the safety from TCU. Richie Grant is from UCF, and then Javon Holland from Oregon. They're all very similar players. They can all do a lot of different things, cover in a slot on occasion, play deep, play in the box. They can all do different things. I have them graded very similarly. And the reason I think a safety at 47 makes a lot of sense, frankly, is because I really, really like this cornerback class. And I know that outside corner is a definite need for the Chargers. And they could certainly take one at 47. Everybody on Chargers Twitter loves Asante Samuel Jr., and I like him as well. But then you have a guy like Paulson Adebo. You have Ifeatu Melifonwu. You have Ambry Thomas from Michigan, Tyson Campbell from Georgia, that you could get in the third round with one of those 2 picks for the Chargers. And so for me right now, I think it makes a lot of sense for the Chargers to get another safety because, we were able to talk with you like the day after that Brandon Staley was hired, right? And one of the things that we talked about is how they use their safeties. And obviously Derwin James is going to be kind of in a John Johnson role, but they're going to have 3 safeties on the field, on 75% of their plays. And so to me, getting another safety makes a lot of sense. And like I'd mentioned about Derwin James, I love Derwin James, excited to see what he can do in this defense, but he's played like 4 games in the last 2 seasons. So I think adding a premier safety in the second round makes a ton of sense for the Chargers at this point.
Yeah, it's hard to really, put the stock in that Derwin James is going to be there every game for the long haul. The hope is he can. And, we can sit here and say how amazing and dynamic he is regardless and how good he's going to be in this new system. But it's hard to really just say, it's going to happen. So we need to see it happen first. But no, I think safety is a good spot. And as you alluded to, safeties are extremely important in Brandon Staley's defense. I had Dan and Jake from their new podcast, Chargers Unleashed, on my show yesterday. And so we were kind of talking a little bit on this topic and how I think the inside linebacker position is not as necessary in a Staley defense just because of how often he uses smaller speed guys in the box and all over the field. Having, nickel and dime packages 80% plus of the time. That's nothing to say who the Chargers have, but that just shows that they need to put a premium on these defensive backs. What do you think of, because I think he'll fall because of injury history. I don't know how much you've looked on him personally, so if you haven't, sorry, I'm putting you on the spot. But Andre Cisco from Syracuse, who was a great prospect, but unfortunately was injured. We did a profile on him as well on LAFB Network. How do you feel about him? And if he was available, obviously if the Chargers don't go safety at in the second round, do you feel confident maybe a guy like that later deeper because of the injury history?
I like Andre Cisco. I think he's got some of the better ball skills and ball production of the safety class. I think he had like 7 interceptions in 2019 or something like that. So he's a playmaker, and that injury history that you mentioned, I think it should drive him down. And so there's some other safeties I think that they could target, with like the 97th pick, like Cisco, or like a Tyree Gillespie from Missouri, maybe a Trill Williams from Syracuse, Andre Cisco's teammate. So there are some other guys. I just think, from a premier talent standpoint, I think it's much easier to find a cornerback and, in the 3rd round and turn him into like a legitimate CB1 starting kind of corner. Whereas safety, I would much rather prefer them take a shot on a premier, player at that position. And, I know Dan tweeted this out yesterday or 2 days ago from the gentleman from PFF who had them taking Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah at 13.
Mm-hmm.
I think that makes a lot of sense too. Honestly, I do. Like, as much as I think offensive tackle is the pick in round 1, but with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, I know
you say that very well, by the way.
Yeah, I think everybody kind of lists him as a linebacker, but I think he's a safety, and I have him listed as my number 1 overall safety, and I think that's where he'll play. And I think with the way that Brandon Staley moves around his defense, man, like having Owusu-Koramoah, Kenneth Murray, and Derwin James on each side, playing, Owusu-Koramoah and Derwin James playing the star and the money positions, and then Murray in the middle, like roaming the field, making plays. That defensive trio would be so much fun to watch. And so I know everybody's kind of focused on cornerback and offensive tackle, but I think Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is a special player, and I think that would be a fantastic fit.
Yeah, that's it's interesting. We talked about that too, and I've been talking about that a lot. Is if the Chargers don't go tackle at 13, like, would it be a huge mistake? And I'm with you in the camp that I think that should be their pick. But yeah, a guy like that does give them that defense would just be so disgusting. It would be so good. And I think what Justin Herbert showed us, that yes, he is the prize, he is the money, he is who you protect, he is who you build around. But because of what he did last year with a historically awful offensive line, it's not like if they don't take a tackle, all of a sudden he's going to regress and throw 30 interceptions and blah, 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 all this. Like, he's still going to be very good with what they've done in free agency on the offensive line. So they don't want to pigeonhole themselves, and that has to be the pick. It should be, but like you're saying, if they do a different route, I think they can get away with it, and then just, make that defense top 5 in the league. Just like that. Like, that would be stud.
Yeah. I mean, it's so tough for me as an offensive line guy. Like, that's my thing, right? And the value of taking an offensive lineman in the first round, it's just so much safer. And I've had this conversation with so many people, like, who think, oh, if Rashawn Slater or Penei Sewell aren't on the board, like, taking Christian Darrisaw or Tevin Jenkins or whoever is a reach at 13. And I'm like, I really just disagree with that kind of sentiment, right? Because if that's true and those 2 players are off the board, then at 13 you can pick whoever you think is the best guy at that position. Whether it's Christian Darrisaw, he's not my favorite, but I would get it, and I understand that pick. And so I just think at 13 you'd be able to take the best offensive tackle of the next group. And I know you have a second top 50 pick, and you can certainly get a Brady Christensen or an Alex Leatherwood there. I just think, with the Chargers' history of not panning out on the offensive line, I think, taking a first round left tackle is just this safer value. And that's something that Brandon Staley talked about in free agency, right? Like, they wanted the value stuff, one of the value signings. And so I think the value at 13 is an offensive tackle, in my opinion. But if there is a second round offensive tackle, I would understand that approach as well. And it's not too far off for Tom Telesco to pass on the offensive line in the first round, because he's done that every single year except for his first season.
Yeah. History tells us a number of different things. I think what's exciting about the present staff is it's very against the grain of the historical, what we've seen the last 8 years in the Telesco regime, or at least we hope so. But what they've done in free agency so far, and, Frank Smith as the offensive line coach, I know he'll have a heavy say in kind of what they do. And obviously we had him on a couple months ago, and he wouldn't give us anything then, because obviously, they're not going to tell us stuff. But I would love to have him after the draft, just to see how involved he was, how vocal he was at pick 13, to see what they do. And if they do decide to wait until that second round, if he feels there's some players there that have the passion that he talked about, that have the football IQ he talked about, and then he can coach them up to be a starter at the left tackle. So Yeah, history tells us exactly what you were saying. The hope is that this new regime is building a new future and not repeating what history is. So, we'll see about that. So, but yeah, so you like overall you like safety there at the second round if things go as you like.
Yeah, that's the route that I'm leaning right now, just because I know that the cornerback position is a little deeper. I think, at 47, you've got the chance to get a premier safety, whereas at 47, you're probably not getting a premier cornerback. I think Asante Samuel Jr. would be, perfect for what Brandon Staley wants to do. Very similar to like a Darius Williams kind of role where they can put him inside and outside.
Yeah.
But I just think there are other cornerbacks later. I mean, you could even get down to like the 4th round where you get a guy like Thomas Graham from Oregon, or I think I already said Ambry Thomas, but that kind of player I think would be a fine upgrade, because Chris Harris is going to play on the outside in base packages. Like that's what they've been saying. And so they've got a little more leeway in terms of the cornerback position, because like they'll draft a starter, but he's not going to be on an island all the time because of Michael Davis and Chris Harris. So, but whoever they draft at safety, like they're going to be a starter. They're going to be asked to do a lot of different things because that's how Brandon Staley's defense works.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So it'll be interesting. And then we'll see here when we do the mock, what ends up falling to us in that scenario. So, all right. Well, if you love offensive linemen, then I think the Rams scenario, hopefully you like to talk about, because that's probably the Rams' biggest need, especially after Austin Blythe goes and signs with Kansas City for a very tepid contract, to say the least. I had Jordan Rodriguez on, Rams reporter for The Athletic, and she said the Rams offered probably about the same. And so Blythe just kind of took his chances to start fresh somewhere else, knowing he would be a stopgap option here. So that being said, at 57, and you talked a lot about Tom Telesco, but Les Snead is a guy that does not ever go chalk. Like this guy trades back every single year. It seems like. Even when he doesn't trade back, he's not taking their need. He's taking who he thinks the best player there is. Last year, the need was inside backer. That was like, okay, everyone, we're taking it inside backer with our first pick. They go Cam Akers in the second round. Everyone's shocked. Then they have a pick, 4 picks later? Okay, now it's time for the backer. Maybe an offensive lineman, Van Jefferson, receiver. It's like he does, and those end up being very good picks, I think, and good value picks. And he's done other stuff in the late rounds, getting Jordan Fuller in the 6th when, again, I talked all last offseason that the Rams were going to take safeties. I didn't think they'd take 2 safeties, him and Terrell Burgess, but knowing what John Johnson's contract coming up and yada, yada, yada. So that being said, let's see, we have no idea what he'll do. But the pick they should do is a center, considering right now their options are sliding Austin Corbett back into center, who played some for the Browns, didn't work out great, hence why he played guard for the Rams. Or, they have some other options, some depth guys. They drafted Brian Allen 2 years ago, but he's been so injured, we really don't know what we have in him out of Michigan State. And then the best option right now, I think, is to go center. So I want to hear your thoughts on centers. I know Quinn Miners is a huge topic just because he's a lot of fun, had a great Senior Bowl. I know you looked at him extensively at the Senior Bowl. I talked about if the Rams take him, they got to have a section at SoFi called the Miners midsection, and it's like just dedicated to Quinn Miners. Be fired.
And crop tops.
Crop top. Yeah, Jordan's like, we're going to make T-shirts that have like the belly on them, and then I was like, yeah, we'll have the Miners midsection. It'll be fantastic.
That's awesome. I love that.
But guys like Creed Humphrey, guys, I don't think they'll be there at 57. I just don't think we live in a world where that's realistic. Landon Dickerson, I know injury concerns, but he is a very good prospect. I don't think he'll be there at 57. Quinn Miners, I think, could be. Some people are like, oh, you can wait to get him in the 3rd. I don't think he'll be there in the 3rd. Who are some interior guys you like?
Well, Landon Dickerson and Creed Humphrey, like I think those two are first round players. I think a team like the Steelers, right, like rebuilding their offensive line, they just lost Marquise Pouncey. I wouldn't be surprised if they drafted one of those 2 players in the 1st round. I know the Chiefs, they need interior help as much as they need tackle help, and both of those players have some guard flexibility as well. This is kind of a bit of a wild card, but I think for the Rams and what they want to do with how much outside zone stuff that they will be running, my personal pick would be Kendrick Green from Illinois. I think he tested through the roof, and so did Quinn Miners. But I think ideally for Quinn Miners, you get him in more of a power running system. I think he can certainly do with the outside stuff. But the most important thing for centers in the scheme that the Chargers and the Rams will be running in terms of run packages is you've got to have players who can get up to the 2nd level and players who understand angles enough where they can really excel and get linebackers, get safeties, and kind of make sure that they're setting up cutback lanes for Cam Akers, who I think is going to have a huge season this year.
Yeah.
So Kendrick Green would be my personal selection there. I know some people would feel that like that's maybe a little rich, but the guys who are really tuned into the offensive line, like Brandon Thorne and Duke Manyweather, they think that Kendrick Green's, a borderline first round player. And I think that's a little rich for my personal taste, but I love Elijah Vera Tucker, right? And I think Elijah Vera Tucker is the best second level blocker in the class.
Yeah.
I think Kendrick Green is second. I think Kendrick Green is a fantastic player, and he has some guard flexibility too. So like you can have a kind of competition with him and Austin Corbett, or if I said that name wrong, I'm sorry, but you can kind of work between those two and have some flexibility there. The other one that I would kind of take over Quinn Miners is maybe Josh Myers from Ohio State.
He's on there too.
I think he's just a much more safer player. Like the issue with Quinn Miners for me personally, and really with anybody who is coming from that FCS level, they didn't play in 2020.
Yeah.
And so there's just more risk there. There's a little more unknown. I know he went and had a great Senior Bowl, but this is going to be the Rams' first selection, right? So if I'm taking my first pick in the draft, I want it to be somebody I am fairly confident in not having a lot of risk. And so I think Kendrick Green or Josh Myers would be my selection there.
Yeah, I love both those. They're in my film study list that I'm putting together right now. I also have Drew Dahlman and Ryan McCollum some options as well. There's a lot of, I think, good options for the Rams, which is why I think fans should feel a little at ease. I know I wanted to bring Austin Blythe back just because he was a commodity, a known commodity.
Right.
He's not one of the best centers in the league, but the Rams had an overall a good unit in cohesion, all playing together. But because they let him go, I think there are some good options there at 57 if Snead stays there and if they go chalk like they should. But who knows what they'll do. So I love those two you mentioned. I love Kendrick Green. From what I've watched so far, I love what he does. And then I'm going to get into it more. But Quinn Miners and then Drew Dahlman and Ryan McCollum, I think, are some other options there as well. And when you're going that needy of a position, sometimes you need to reach, in a sense. I know that teams hate doing that, or analysts hate saying that, but just to get that position you need the most. I think some other spots that they could go. I love Chaz Surratt, inside backer out of North Carolina. I don't know how much you know about him. I've talked about him. Came in as a quarterback, like sunshine, and remember the Titans, and ended up moving to linebacker and tackling people going side to side. So I like Chaz Surratt. Could potentially be there at 57. I don't think he'll make it to the third. Maybe who knows? But he might. Joe, I always say it wrong. Tryon. I think I think it's Tryon. Yeah. I don't know if he edge rusher. I don't know if he will make it to 57, but he might, just because of some lack of play last season. But I like him potentially at edge. But I know they have, they drafted a guy last year who they have a lot of hope for in Terrell Lewis. His biggest thing is injuries. I don't know if you want to go another guy that has some question marks also, and just have two question marks competing against each other. But the talent is there, and if he's there, that's a guy they could go after as well, just to solidify the edge rushing alongside obviously Donald and Leonard Floyd. So, but I think center's got to be the pick at 57. But if not, I could see edge or inside backer as well. Yeah,
I think Joe Tryon. I think he would be a fit for the Chargers as well. I mean, there's so much overlap with what the Chargers and Rams are doing.
It's crazy.
Like anybody who fits with the Rams will probably fit with the Chargers, and so I think there's so much overlap there. Tryon is like, he would be a perfect Brandon Staley pick, right? Because he's right in that Leonard Floyd kind of mold, really long, lanky athlete. The other edge rusher in the second round that I could see for both teams is Peyton Turner from Houston. And, I thought it was so funny, Brandon Staley in his press conference, he's like, yeah, we kind of prefer to have home base. Like, we're not sending coaches to anyone. And then literally the next day he sends Gift Smith to Houston to work out with Peyton Turner. So I thought that was a little funny. I think
too.
He is a stud. I had the pleasure of interviewing Peyton Turner back in February. Really great personality as well. So I think he checks a lot of boxes. I see that Renee House talks about the Senior Bowl for Les Snead. Tom Telesco was the same way. They both really like the Senior Bowl players. And so Peyton Turner can make it in a lot of sense. The last center thing that I'll talk about here for the Rams, and really kind of the Chargers as well. I know I'm a Utah guy, and when I was talking about this player on our show, everybody was kind of laughing. But Tristan Hodge from BYU has some center flexibility. He played center in high school It was in Idaho, but he was actually the player of the year in Idaho for 2 years in a row as a center. So got some nice pedigree there, went to Notre Dame, transferred to DYU. Really great personality again. And I think he's somebody that has the athletic upside. You know, he's got guard center flexibility in terms of like a 4th, 5th round pick. If that's where they're targeting their center, I think Tristan Hodge would make a lot of sense for both teams.
Yeah, no, agreed. Yeah, it's so funny how similar both the teams are. And part of that's, you know, obviously Brandon Staley now the head coach of the Chargers. So a lot of stuff is really intertwined now. But even before that, I feel like there's a lot. But before we get to the 3rd round, last pick I want to talk about for those Rams. And because Les Snead, as I talked about, rarely goes chalk, he usually throws people off. There's a player that I've talked about a ton. You probably know where I'm going with this. I'm his like biggest fan, biggest supporter. You know, throw his name out all the time on Twitter. Most analysts, most draft experts, and most simulators have this guy going in the 3rd or 4th round. I personally do not think he will make it out of the 2nd. I don't. I'm probably way higher on him than most, but Demetric Felton to me is a game-changing playmaker that on any team is a guy that you get the ball in his hands 10 times a game, he's going to do a lot of damage with it. And I know the Rams are fairly good at receiver, obviously, with Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. They have Cam Akers at running back. They drafted, you know, a good tight end last year, a good speed tight end in Bryson Hopkins, who really didn't play much, but now with Gerald Everett gone, he will get more playing time. But Demetric Felton is that type of Swiss Army knife that today's NFL covets so much that if he's there at 57, because I don't think he will be there at 88 when the Rams draft again, I would not be opposed at all them making a move and taking him there at 57, because I just think he would be so fun and dynamic in Sean McVay's offense, and we can finally get back to that 2018 offense that can explode at any moment and really blow the doors off of teams. So last thing I want to say about that.
I like Felton a lot, man. He tested so poorly, though. I think that is going to push him down the board for some, because I wasn't expecting him to run a super fast 40 time, but I mean, that RAS score for him is not ideal. I actually was going to say a player that makes a lot of sense there as well would be Michael Carter, the running back from North Carolina. Yeah. He would obviously be, you know, the 4th running back off the board. And I think, you know, we saw his kind of explosiveness at the Senior Bowl where he was able to dominate that game as a running back. And it seems like the Rams draft a running back earlier than everybody thinks every single year.
I would love to see Rams Twitter if they take another running back in the top 3 rounds. After going Darrell Henderson 2 years ago, Cam Akers last year, and do another one, Rams Twitter would implode. Okay, let's get to the 3rd round.
Sounds good.
Start with your Chargers. Who you liking with that pick? If obviously you have them going basically lineman, safety, and then who they got in the 3rd.
Yeah, so I think, you know, the 2nd pick and the 3rd pick for the Chargers, I think they're both going to be defensive players if they go offensive line in the 1st round. Obviously, if they go with, you know, J.C. Horn or Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah in the 1st round, then 2nd round would be tackle. So 3rd round would then be, you know, a safety kind of type, or maybe even an edge rusher. You know, I just talked about Peyton Turner. If he's there at 77, that's a no-brainer for me. I think that kind of value right there is outstanding.
Yeah.
But again, you know, he's got the explosiveness and the length and things like that coaches love, and I'd be frankly pretty surprised if he makes it out of the 2nd round.
Me too. I have mocked Peyton Turner to the Rams also at 88, but I don't know if he'll make it that far. But he's been there in simulators. I'm like, okay, pick.
I know. I mean, it's going to be so interesting, right? Because there's always one position that gets knocked down the board, right? And so right now it seems kind of like that, you know, early 1st or late 1st, early 2nd is going to be dominated by offensive linemen and receivers and things like that. So maybe all these defensive players get pushed down the board, but I'd be pretty surprised if he made it out. So if they go with a secondary piece, I think that's where they would get an edge rusher or maybe an interior offensive lineman. Everybody who knows the Chargers knows about the Notre Dame kind of connection that they have going, and the way So I think for me, you know, one of the things that Brandon Staley talked about this week is that they wanted to get bigger on the offensive line. They wanted to have these more physically imposing people to come in who can frankly move people. And so he also said that they want to add some competition for Ode Ibushi. I think he's going to be the starter, but he's only on a 1-year contract. And so I think interior offensive line with one of these 2 picks makes a lot of sense. And Aaron Banks is, of all the Notre Dame players, right, there's like 12 this draft, but of all the Notre Dame players that I personally would want them to take as their favorite Irishman, it would be Aaron Banks. I think, you know, he brings everything to the table that you could possibly want for an interior offensive lineman. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if he went in the second round, but he's 6'6", big, physical, imposing kind of player. He did take some reps at center in Mobile, so he's got some kind of center flexibility. So I think Aaron Banks at 77 would be, the ideal fit. I could also see Ben Cleveland from Georgia. I think, Cleveland is just a massive bodybuilding kind of massive human being. I think he weighs like 340 pounds and he's just, built from granite. And that if Quinn Miners is there at 77, then that's where I would personally be interested in him to come in and play guard. Otherwise, as like an edge rusher type, obviously I talked about Peyton Turner. But then there's really one of my favorite edge rushers in this class is Ellerson Smith from Northern Iowa. And again, somebody that really fits the prototype of what Brandon Staley has traditionally liked. Really long, lanky, athletic player and just tested through the roof. And I think he's somebody that Brandon Staley, yeah, he does. He looks exactly like Leonard Floyd.
Yeah.
And, you talked about, the Senior Bowl kind of things. And I can't remember who it was. Oh, it was Amari Rogers. There's this play where, Ellerson Smith is out on the edge and he chased down Amari Rogers on an end around. And like that kind of athleticism, it's just so hard to find at the edge rusher position in the third round. And I think if he had a 2020 season, he probably would be a second round pick. So I think Ellerson Smith at 77 or Aaron Banks at 77 would be my choice right now.
Yeah, that's the thing where it's going to be fascinating about this draft. There's a lot of players that get drafted later just because they either didn't have seasons or missed games.
Right.
It would have gone a lot higher. So you're going to get a lot of these phenomenal players in these mid rounds that probably would have had first round grades had they played. So I think that's what's exciting for these teams and specifically the Rams who don't have a first round pick, is you're going to get some really good talent in these back end rounds because guys, we just don't have as much tape on them or they just had a year off. And that can play, obviously you can play devil's advocate and say, well, they're just not going to be as good because they haven't played in a year. So, I mean, it can go both ways, but I think we'll see how that goes. So, I like all those for the Chargers. Let me ask you this. This is kind of backtracking because I don't want to spend too much time on it because it's going back to the second, but just because you're talking Notre Dame. If the Chargers don't go tackle in the first, how do you feel about Liam Eichenberg, who potentially would be there in the second as a tackle?
Yeah, he's one of the players that I feel like is, one of the most slept on guys in this class. Frankly, because he's not like the best athlete, but I have him graded right behind Christian Darrisaw. I think he's a fantastic technician in this class, and I definitely think he's a plug and play kind of player. It's just going to be interesting. He's got some shorter arms. He didn't even hit the 33-inch threshold, so it would just be interesting to see a team like the Chargers, who have traditionally valued length at the position, take a guy like that who really wouldn't be kind of fitting what they want in a box, right? Because Forrest Lamp was that same kind of player, right?
Yeah.
A little underrated athlete, great technician, but he had shorter arms, and so they played him at guard. So I think Liam Eichenberg would be a plug and play player if he's there at 47. It's just going to be interesting to see where he ends up because, there's obviously better athletes. There's Brady Christensen there. There's Dylan Radune's there, Alex Leatherwood. So
Dylan Radune, someone in the beginning in the chat asked if he played some center and interior. So let me ask you this too. This is my MO. I'm always like, before we get to pick 88 for the Rams, you talked about, and I know, but just for the people listening that maybe don't know, you talked about, tackles testing with shorter arms and why then that they move inside. Why is that important? Why is it important for a tackle to have longer arms? And if they're under that 33 inches, it's seen as like ooh, okay, maybe they're guard material.
Well, it's different for every player and every individual, right? Because Joe Thomas had 32-inch arms, and he was able to make a Hall of Fame career and arguably the best Cleveland Brown of all time. So it's different for every player and every team. Like, one of the reasons that I think Elijah Vera Tucker could play tackle despite having 32-inch arms is because he's so smart and he works angles, and that, he's got the athletic traits to kind of – yeah, and he's got the ability to overcompensate. And so, I think it's different for everybody, but if you're taking like a flyer on a late round kind of player, like at 88 for the Rams, I think you're probably targeting someone who really fits the profile of what you want, and you hope you can develop that player into more than that. And so the short answer here is that tackles need length because edge rushers have length. Right. Like we've been talking about Leonard Floyd, right? Joe Tryon, Ellerson Smith, all these players have 34, 35-inch arms. And so the simple answer here is if you have longer arms than the guy across from you, you can get your arms onto him quicker than he can get his arms onto you. And so It is nice. And so you have a guy like, Joey Bosa, or in the same division as the Rams, you have Nick Bosa, you have JJ Watt, Chandler Jones. Like, it's much easier for you to be able to get a longer armed athlete, get his arms onto these edge rushers quicker. And it's just kind of more about like who these guys are facing on a week to week basis, because one of the things I love that Brandon said you talked about is you got to have tackles now, like the left tackle, right tackle. It doesn't really matter anymore because every team has two guys that they can put on both edges and get after you. So, you really
typically rushes from the right side. So, can't be weak there.
Right. Exactly.
So, all right, cool. Yeah. All right. So let's get to this Rams 88 pick. And we'll go through these next two fairly quickly so we can get into the actual simulator and go through that. I think if they go interior linemen, then this should be a backer, right? And Chad Surratt will not be there, I don't think, in the third round. You maybe have a shot at a guy like a Pete Warner at Ohio State. Could be there, could go a little earlier. Maybe Tony Fields, the second out of West Virginia, probably earlier. But if he's there, I think that's a really good slam dunk pick. What's hard about analyzing these picks for the Rams is because we just don't know exactly how much new defensive coordinator Raheem Morris is going to adapt Staley's scheme and how much he will change it. He's shown throughout his tenure or throughout his coaching that he's really adaptable, does a lot of different things. Obviously, his main MO is the Tampa 2, but I think they'll have an adapt. So if this is a Brandon Staley defense, I don't know if you need to take a linebacker this high, just because, as I mentioned, now that he's with the Chargers, I don't think there's a premium on inside backers because of how much they do with defensive backs. But depending on what Raheem Morris does, maybe it will behoove them to get a better backer, because that's been kind of the need for them for quite some time, especially since last year after Corey Littleton left in free agency. I know he had a bad year with the Raiders, but he was really, really good for this Rams team, and they just haven't had the athleticism there. And they got away with it last year because of those schemes that I talked about, and because of their talent on the back end. So it'll really be dependent kind of what Raheem Morris wants. But if those two guys are both there, I like both of them a lot. We could see them also go edge. I know I mentioned that in the second round, so that could be another position, or a couple of receivers. If they get, I know they added Deshaun Jackson as that speed guy they needed, but 34 injury history. Who knows how many games he's even going to play.
Big injury history.
Yeah, big injury history. So someone like a Marquez Stevenson out of Houston, I like here in the third as a potential guy. They could go get a jump ball guy who I know they've talked about, they've wanted for quite some time now. Just kind of fits a different profile than what they have right now on the roster. And so I'll just kind of piggyback since they're pick 88 and I think they're at 104. So what is that, like 16 picks apart? I'm horrible at math, but somewhere around there, less than 20 apart. 16, 18. Someone in the chat help me out, but somewhere. So basically I think it'll be a combination of either a backer and an edge, or maybe a backer and a receiver. Or they just add depth in the secondary, because they did lose Troy Hill. I know they still have Darius Williams. They still have Jalen Ramsey. They still have, Taylor Rapp. They still have Jordan Fuller and Terrell Burgess, who I think is going to have a breakout year this year. I know you love at a University of Utah. I love me some Terrell Burgess, SoCal guy, I think from North San Diego County originally. But they lost John Johnson and Troy Hill. So they need some more depth there too, right? They haven't been able to add anyone in free agency. So it's not, backer and receiver, or it's not backer and edge. I think you definitely go backer and someone on the defensive backfield in that. And that could be some of those safeties you talked about if they fall. Maybe an Andre Siska they take a flyer on that early. I think that's a little early because of his injury history. But like you said, he's a ball hawk, had 7 receptions in 2019. So a guy that they could kind of develop, get healthy, get right, and then it doesn't have to play the entire game. So a lot of options there for the Rams. Luckily, with the way this team's constructed, they have needs, but not glaring needs. They're all kind of like it's just to better them for the future, but it's not like they need a guy to come in and start tomorrow, because I think they can get by with how they've constructed the roster for this entire season with none of these rookies starting, if I'm being honest. So they have some flexibility there.
Yeah, I think one of the linebackers here that would make a lot of sense as early as 57 too is Gabriel Cox from North Dakota State / LSU. I think he is the perfect modern day linebacker. And I think him and Chad Surratt are so similar as these cerebral coverage players who can also hit and run. I think Chad Surratt is probably a little more versatile, a little more athletic, but Gabriel Cox went down and in Mobile, and he was covering receivers for a lot of the week, and he did a great job with that. So, everybody needs a coverage linebacker. I think Gabriel Cox would make a lot of sense. In terms of receiver for the Rams, if they're really wanting a jump ball kind of player, I think one of the most slept on players in this draft for the wide receiver position is Des Fitzpatrick from Louisville.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's one of the most well-rounded receivers in the college game, in the class. And Louisville did use him as kind of a jump ball player, and he definitely has the athletic prototype to go out and do that. Another player that I think would make a lot of sense there is Cornell Powell, probably in the 4th round for them, the wide receiver from Clemson. Really kind of fits that physical profile. And, we all saw that picture from him at his pro day, looking like DK Metcalf 2.0 out there. So those two players, both Senior Bowl guys, both players who could do, stretch the field, do some intermediate routes, jump ball stuff for the Rams, be a red zone threat, which you said they kind of don't really have, right? Because they have Robert Woods, who's more like the route runner. Same with Cooper Kupp, although he's had some amazing success in the red zone. And then Deshaun Jackson and Van Jefferson each have their own different skill sets. Yeah. So getting a physical down the field guy would make a lot of sense for them. And I think Cornell Powell or Des Fitzpatrick would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I like those a lot. Showed some great things on tape, and I think would fit exactly that role that you talked about it with Matthew Stafford. They had a guy like Marvin Jones that could go up and do that. And so getting a guy in the draft that they can mold into that, I think would be a great move for them. So realize I'm new at this live thing. I realized I was just not changing our banner. So we were just stuck on the Chargers 2nd round pick forever. So I finally updated the banner. I'm like, I got to get on this. So Emily is 27 and said, I like Trevon Grimes to the Rams in the late rounds. I like that too. It's a good player as well. So I don't know if you want to comment on that at all. Well, I'm setting up, let's set up this mock draft thing. Give me a second here.
Yeah, Trevon Grimes, I just don't. I know he went down to the Senior Bowl and had a good week. I just don't see like the kind of fluidity and versatility that is kind of my preference, my archetype. He definitely is a jump ball guy. So if you only want a jump ball guy, then you could get him or a Nico Collins from Michigan. But I think that the only jump ball guys just don't really bring a lot of value. You've got to be able to do different kind of things. Daniel Jeremiah kind of talks about this with secondary players and specifically safeties. Like, you've got to do 2 different things. You got to be able to play deep, play in the box, or play in the slot. And I think wide receiver is kind of the same thing. Like, you've got to be a deep ball guy, a jump ball guy, a route runner, or a possession guy. Like, you've got to be at least 2 of those things to really bring value to your franchise. And I just don't think that Trevon Grimes really does any of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well said. So, all right. So now let's get this. We'll let this simulator get to our first pick for the Chargers. And we'll just see. I find it funny whenever I do these. It's amazing. And as it should be. I mean, there are different people doing it. But when you use the Draft Network, Pro Football Network, or Pro Football Focus, how different they have the players going, how different they have them graded. Yeah. And you just get so much different things. I forgot I had them selected here for the first. So who do you want the Chargers taking in the first real quick before we let it keep rolling?
Just go with Darisaw really quick.
Darisaw. Done.
Yeah. I think that's probably it's probably either going to be him or JC Horn at this point.
Yeah. It's seeming like it's trending to that. You just did your draft profile on Tevin Jenkins. Would you be mad with him at 13? Do you think that's a reach, or would you rather than trade back and try to get him, or do you like that as well as an option?
I like that as well. I have Tevin Jenkins graded higher than Christian Darisaw. He's my offensive tackle 4. If I had graded Elijah Vera Tucker like a guard, like everybody else, then Tevin Jenkins would be my 3rd tackle. Mm-hmm. So I just don't think that, if the Chargers really value length, then Tevin Jenkins is not going to be the pick because he's another one with 33-inch arms. So I think he's going to be a fantastic player. I think the Raiders are probably going to take him at 17, and I'm going to hate every single second of it because I love Tevin Jenkins.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they'll probably take like Liam Eichenberg or something way early, like they did with Colt Miller a few years ago. Yeah. That's nothing against Eichenberg, but it's just how the Raiders operate. So, all right, sure. I don't know if you can see if you want me to scroll, but let's see if you want me to look at a certain position for you here.
Are you up at the top, or are you? Okay, you're scrolling down. Never mind. Can you click on the safeties for me?
I sure can.
I know I see Javon Holland just went to the.
You got Richie Grant there, your guy. We got Jamar Johnson.
All right, click on the corners too, please.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this would be tough, right? Because you have Asante Samuel Jr., Ifeatu Melifonwu, yeah. And I think those 2 corners would be my choice. I also really like Paulson Adeba from Stanford, but I also realize that that's probably a little rich for most people. Mm-hmm. For me, I love Asante Samuel Jr., but Richie Grant is too much for me to pass up on. And I think, versatility is what he brings to the table, right? And, he played free safety in the box. He played everything that you could possibly want at UCF. And then he went down at the Senior Bowl and he took reps all week long as an outside corner and he was shutting people down. So for me at 47, Richie Grant is just too much to pass up on.
Yeah. He's similar like Derwin James, can do it all, which is what you want in this defense. Okay. Richie Grant, that's the pick.
Yep. Let's do it.
I can make the sound. Oh, there you go. Liam Eschmer to the Raiders. Look at that. But they got him in the second. Well, they actually got him in the second.
You called it.
I guess so. So, all right. So let's see. Let me go back to our all view here for my Rams. So we got some good edge guys there, which would be hard to pass on Rousseau or Osai.
The Rousseau experience has been so weird for me.
Yeah, oh yeah. It's always different. Sometimes I think when you did his profile, then you had him as like a first round grade or potentially the first edge off the board.
Well, I think the thing with Rousseau, right, is that he's so raw. He's only played the position for one season, but he had 15.5 sacks in that one season. Like, it's just absurd. And so I just don't understand like the evaluation because he hasn't played any games. Like, he tested okay, but that was kind of the expectation, is that he wasn't going to be like a crazy athlete. Yeah. That's just wild to me that he's, fallen to this far. So
this is where the difference in grading comes, because I really don't think, Chester out here, you have 79, so obviously they're basically there by their predictive board, they're having him go in the third round. I don't really see that happening. Quinn Miners could certainly, I think he's second, third fringe kind of. I know that he's like the fan favorite. I don't know exactly how all the teams feel about him per se. So like I said, I think interior lineman seems like the pick, but if it falls like this, I don't know how you pass on one of these ed guys with all these guys sitting here. I think it has to be Rousseau. I think with that kind of talent, because of the question marks out. I know Aaron Donald's their premium rusher, but he's on the interior line. So you have Leonard Floyd, and then question mark: is it going to be Terrell Lewis? Is it going to be who's really going to be your other premier pass rusher? And Gregory Rousseau could be that guy and be set up for the future. So I think I'm going to go with that. I think I just go BPA. Les Snead gets a great rusher here. Could be crazy.
As a Chargers fan, you should have got an edge instead of Richie Grant. I disagree, Andre, but that's okay. I will say, though, if Joseph Osai is there on the board, I think that would also make a lot of sense for them because he is pro ready. Like, he's going to come in and make an instant impact right away at minimum as a run defender. So I certainly wouldn't hate that pick for the Rams either.
Yeah. Carlos Basham I like too. So all right, you're up for the Chargers.
All right. Well, this board fell perfectly because you have Ifeatu Melifonwu right there on the board for the taking. Yeah. Just real quick, can you click on the other cornerbacks for me?
Sure can.
Okay, so like this would be awesome, right, for the Chargers who need a corner at this point. Paulson Adebo, Ifeatu Melifonwu, Tyson Campbell, Benjamin St. Justice. I'm not a huge fan of Elijah Griffin. I know he's been kind of a late riser. Even Robert Rochelle from Central Arkansas, I think, would make a lot of sense. So in this instance, it's too much for me personally to pass up on Ifeatu Melifonwu. Just an athletic freak, right? And he's like 6'4". So him and his brother, I think his brother's name is Obi. Like, they're both just athletic freaks who, frankly, probably chose the wrong sport. They should probably be playing basketball for Syracuse at this point. But
right, I know.
I love Ifeatu Melifonwu.
See if I can get back to these ads. Sometimes just get in the way. There we go. Yeah, that's a great pick for them. Makes a lot of sense. Being able to have him and Richie Grant in that back end alongside a hopeful, healthy Derwin James. But again, if he's not, you at least have that flexibility and depth there. So I think that's kind of a slam dunk pick for them. So okay, this kind of worked out well for the Rams too, because we didn't go interior lineman, and Josh Myers does fall here in the third round, who we talked about it as definitely a potential good get for them at Ohio State, who has a history of fairly good offensive linemen.
Trey Smith, my gosh.
Yeah, some good, I think some decent options there. I think you have to, if you pass on interior offensive line, I think you have to take one here at one of the third round picks. Again, who knows what Les Snead will do, but I think as just someone analyzing the team, that should be the pick. And so I'm going to go with Josh Myers too, who just makes too much sense for them.
Absolutely. The Trey Smith thing too is a weird experience because I think he was one of the best guards in the country last year, and now he's potentially falling to the third round. I know he's got some medical questions, but that's just wild to me.
Do you Quincy Roche is another player that I feel like has just fallen a lot lately. Is it surprise you seeing him still here in the third?
Not really. I think Quincy Roche was kind of a player that was really overvalued from specifically Chargers fans. Like he went down to the Senior Bowl and he had a great week, right? But it's so hard for me to get into a player when the edge rusher opposite of him on his own team is just, far and away a better player. And so, when you're watching Miami defense, it's so much harder to beat into Quincy Roche when Jalen Phillips is across the field from him. And so I'm not surprised by this at all.
Yeah. Okay. Chargers pick 97. Who you got?
Okay. So click on the edge rushers for me.
Yes.
You scroll down a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Patrick Jones, who's, an interesting Dalen Hayes.
That fall is surprising to me. Wow, they have Ellerson Smith at 150. Okay, yeah. Can you click back to the interior offensive line?
Yes, there we go.
Okay, so this is another great situation for interior offensive line. I think any of these players would really make sense. I would be intrigued by the edge rusher class, but with how they're kind of falling, if this is the board, right? And again, this is all mock drafts are all good fun, right? And so the way that the edge rushers are looking right now, you still got Hamilcar Rashed on there. Ellerson Smith is still on there. I'm not even going to try and say his name. The kid from Vanderbilt is still on there. So I think at this point I would go with interior offensive line. And like I said, Aaron Banks to me just makes so much sense. I think Kendrick Green as well, but I view Kendrick Green a little more as a center. And so because of Corey Lindsley, obviously they don't need that. So I would go with Aaron Banks here.
Like it. Yeah. Yeah. And seeing that, this is a scenario where had the Rams not taken an interior in the earlier rounds, if Kendrick Green is still sitting there, that's a great pick for them if they were to wait. And in this scenario, and we may see this play out, we took a linebacker for the Rams earlier, and or excuse me, no, we did not take a linebacker, and so now, as you'll see, the pickings get pretty slim for linebacker. But I do like Tony Fields a second. I talked about him before, a guy that's not super hyped, I would say, but I like his athleticism. I like what he could bring. Yeah. I know that people see that, you're at pick 103, you're taking a guy ranked in 192. You can't.
Happens every year.
Yeah, you can't look at that as your ranking. If that's a guy on your board as a player of need, as a position of need, that's what you go get. So I think we cross the check the boxes of getting our interior lineman. We can get a linebacker now, which are our two biggest needs, and then we added edge depth, which is another need that's not as talked about as much for the Rams, but it is definitely a need after some pieces they lost. And then after this, so I'm going to take Tony Fields.
I would also say I like Monty Rice as well. If you turn on the Alabama game, it's a little unfair for him because they asked him to cover Jalen Waddle a couple of times, but he was stride for stride with Jalen Waddle on a few occasions, and so I think Monty Rice, he doesn't have like great instincts as a pure middle linebacker, but as like a will linebacker, I think he's got some intriguing athletic traits, and he can run for sure. I want to say he ran relatively well at the 40-yard dash on his pro day as well. So Monty Rice, I think, is somebody that Rams fans should keep an eye on, and Chargers fans too, because I think Monty Rice has a lot of special teams experience as well. Yeah, great call. And yeah, if you ran side for side with Waddle, I think you can run a pretty good 40 times. So yeah, absolutely. So good job there. So, all right, guys, what do you think? What do you think of these rounds 2 and 3? I think next Saturday, 9 a.m., we'll get into rounds 4 and 5. And I'm going to save this, Steven, so we can kind of base our next picks on this. I know it won't happen exactly that way when we do the simulation again, but I think it's better for fans to see, like, okay, let's see it all play out as opposed to like just giving a fresh new and, taking a different player. Well, we could do both ways. We'll play with it. We'll see what the people tell us. We'll check out. So, but yeah, let us know what you guys think of this. Thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate it. It's always fun talking drafts. Always fun talking to you, Steven. Obviously, like I said, you're a wealth of knowledge. You're a machine in the draft content. So thank you. Make sure to follow Steven at Steven I. Haglund on Twitter. All your great Chargers content, does all of his articles for the LAFB Network, LAFBnetwork.com. So you can check him out there. And you guys have some exciting podcast news. Why don't you go ahead and share that? Yeah, so we the Guilty as Charged podcast is the one that me and my friends Tyler and Alex do. We used to all write with Bolt Beat together, and we just recently signed a deal with Blue Wire to kind of take that next step. We were holding out. We've been approached by a couple of networks earlier on in the process, and we wanted to make sure that we felt really comfortable with whichever network that we were joining, and Blue Wire has been really great throughout this process, and can't wait to see what that next step in our journey at the Guilty as Charged podcast looks like with them.
Yeah, man, super pumped for you guys. You guys are putting in work, doing awesome stuff. So Blue Wire's a powerhouse early on in the podcast game. So congrats to you and Tyler.
Thank you.
For joining
Appreciate
in.
that.
I'm glad we all work kind of in cohesion and together. And you obviously contribute to LAFB Network, so appreciate all you do for us. And let's just keep building this thing, keep rolling, and keep giving our LA football teams the coverage they deserve. That is so sorely lacked among mainstream media. So that's why we're here. That's why we do this. Let's
Absolutely.
This live show to get it bigger and better every week. I think it'll be fun.
Absolutely. And yeah, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. And we're looking forward to doing this throughout the rest of the season, the rest of the draft season and beyond.
Absolutely. So yeah, we'll just keep rolling with this and see what your guys' feedback is. So yeah, as of now, tentatively next week, rounds 4 and 5, using already these picks as we kind of build towards that. But we'll tweak it. We'll talk throughout the week. So
100%.
My man, shoot him straight. Enjoy that golf course. I'm jealous. Have fun.
Thank you. I hope that I avoid the slides today. That's the goal.
Good luck. Open those hips, baby. Open those hips. So
thanks, man.
Yeah. All right, brother. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you guys all for tuning in. This is the LAFB Live. We'll talk to you guys all next week.
Bye, guys.